Hello, chess friends. Today I am LeelaZero, and I played Stockfish 18. On move 37, I put a knight on f5 where a pawn could take it, and I let him take it. Watch till the end, because the square I bought is one he can never attack again. Now, the game. Pawn to e4, pawn to c5, pawn to d4, and he takes. Pawn to c3. This is the Smith-Morra gambit, a club player's opening, and almost every engine will tell you the offer is not sound. Your hand takes it, and so would his. I take back with the knight. Pawn to a6, my knight comes out. His knight comes out, my bishop to e2, a solid center. My king goes to safety. His knight develops, and my queen steps to b3. My queen eyes b7. My knight eyes d5. My bishop wants c4. My other knight heads for a 5. Minus 0.17. He is a pawn up, and you are looking at a level game, because every piece I own has somewhere to be. Remember that number. It is the best he will feel all day. He did not take it. Pawn to d3, handed straight back. My bishop takes, knight to c6, and pawn to c4. Two pawns own d5 and b5 for the rest of the game. He can never free himself and never expand. If you have walked into the Great Wall, you know how the next 20 moves go. This shape has a name. It is the bind. And that little square on the end of my e-pawn, f5, will matter more than either of us knows yet. Knight to f6, knight to e2, knight to e5. I could push my pawn to f4 and kick it away. I castle instead. Chasing a knight feels like progress, and it usually is not. King to safety, pawn to d6, knight to c3, pawn to g6, pawn to b3, bishop to g7, bishop to e3, pawn to b6, bishop back to c2, bishop to b7, queen to e1, pawn to a6, pawn to a4. Now b5 is covered twice, his queen side is sealed, my knight still watches d5. He has a pawn on a6 and a pawn on b6, and neither will ever move again. King to safety, rook to d1, queen to c7, pawn to f3. This is not development, it is a brick. His bishop on b7 has one job, the long road to my king, and I have filled that road with concrete. You are looking at a season ticket for a stadium they pulled down last year. My knight still looks at d5, my other bishop watches b6. Stockfish spends 20 moves staring at that wall like a general admiring his Maginot Line while the war goes round it. Rook to c8, rook to d2, rook to e8, queen to f2, knight back, rook to d1, queen to b8, queen up, knight to h5, king to h1, knight to c5, queen back, bishop to g5, knight out, queen up, queen to c7, and my queen returns to f2. Count how many times you have watched her land there. She goes to h4, she goes back to e1, and I am doing nothing on purpose. Rome was not built in a day, and this bind will not be either. My knight has not stopped looking at d5, my rook has not stopped looking at d6. I have no way in, neither has he, and one of us runs out of useful moves first. It is not going to be me. Queen to b8, queen to e1, bishop to a8. He is dancing the same dance, b7 to c6, to a8 and back, and getting less for it. That bishop wants this square. My pawn holds it, my bishop holds it, and my knight is somewhere else entirely, which tells you how worried I am. It has not attacked one thing all game. This is Alice in Wonderland chess, where you run as fast as you can to stay exactly where you were. Queen to h4, queen to a7, queen to f2, queen to b8, rook to b1, knight to e6, bishop to e3, knight to c5, rook back, bishop to c6, rook out, bishop to a8, king to g1, knight to f6, rook back, bishop to c6, knight to d4. Now the knights go to work. This one can reach f5, the other reaches d5, and those are the only two squares no pawn of his defends. My bishop keeps watching b6, my rook keeps watching d6, and e7 is looking thin. Bishop to a8, bishop to g5, knight to d7, and here it is. Knight to d5. Look at f5. My knight on d4 can go there. This one hits e7 and f6, and one single unit in his whole army defends f5. It is the pawn on g6. One pawn is the entire lock, and Sherlock would have solved this one before breakfast. So the question is not how I reach a 5. It is what that pawn is worth to you. Pawn to e5. He had to break somewhere. Many of you will have seen the other knight jump. Knight to e7 with check, hitting his king and his rook at the same time. It is a fork and a check, and your hand plays it before your head arrives. His rook takes it. My knight comes to 5 anyway. His rook drops back. Pawn to b4, knight to b7, knight to e7. Again, rook takes again. My bishop recaptures, and his bishop comes to f8. Minus 1.96. The check was never free. His rook covered that square all along, so the fork forked nothing. I handed over a knight to reach the square I was going to reach anyway. My rook still stares at d6. His rook reaches my c4 pawn, and his knight walks into c5. I am standing on f5 and a piece poorer for the privilege. So instead, knight to f5. I am not developing, and I am not attacking anything. I am asking him to take it, and he must, because if it stays there, it hits d6 and e7 and h6, and his position falls over. It is a Trojan horse, except this city does not get a vote on wheeling it in. Pawn takes knight. Here is the move your hand plays without asking anybody. Pawn takes back. He answers with pawn to f6, my bishop retreats. His bishop takes my knight, rook takes, pawn to e4, bishop to f4, knight to e5, pawn takes, pawn to a5. Minus 1.67, and look what refuted it. No check and no capture. A small quiet pawn to f6 that gave his bishop air, and my whole position sagged. My rook wants d6 and cannot have it. His knight lands on f3, his other knight hits b3, and I have nothing for the piece. The move I skipped was the move that mattered. So the check comes first. Knight to e7, king to h8, and knight takes on f5. Look what I bought. He has no g-pawn. He will never have a g-pawn again, so no pawn he owns can ever attack this square. My knight hits d6, e7, g7, and h6. My rook comes down behind it, and nothing chases him off. I paid a knight for one pawn and one square, and the square does not expire. He is a tenant you cannot evict because he bought the house. Knight to b7, pawn to b4, pawn to a5, queen to h4, pawn to f6. He has offered me the pawn on a 5. You will take it, because it is a pawn, and it is sitting there. My pawn takes on a 5. Pawn takes my bishop. And here you might think this is fine, because my queen takes back. His rook swings to g8, my pawn runs, his bishop to f8, my queen to h4, his knight to c5, my king steps aside, and his rook lifts to g6, minus 3.93. I got a pawn back, and I am still a clean piece down. His rook points down the g-file at my king, his knight steps into e4, his pawn owns d4, his other knight comes to f6. Taking it back does not undo it. The mistake was one move earlier, when I went shopping, so my queen runs to h3. Bishop to f8, my pawn takes, his knight takes back, my bishop retreats, knight to c5. My king steps aside, and his rook comes to a6, minus 4.17. That pawn on f6 was not a gift. It was a question, and the question was whether I noticed my bishop was attacked. I did not. He takes it, and I cannot take back, so my pawn goes on alone. His knight hits my bishop, his rook swings across, his other knight collects c4, and my rook still stares at a d6 pawn I will never win. One pawn, and it cost me a bishop and 5 points. So the bishop steps back to e3. Queen to c7, pawn to c5. This is the second front. His king is stuck on h8 with my knight beside it, and now I open a file on the other wing. My pawn hits b6 and d6, my other pawn takes on a 5, my queen looks down at h7. He now has 2 weaknesses, 1 army, and no way to be in both places. Pawn takes, knight to b8, king to h1, pawn to c4. My knight can take his bishop whenever it likes. It guards his king. It is a piece for a piece, and every instinct you have says do it. Knight takes on g7, his queen takes back, my pawn to g4, his rook to g8, my queen to h5, his queen to g6, my queen back, his queen to g7, my pawn to h3, and his queen steps to e7, minus 2.47. Same material as before, and I have thrown the game away. That knight was not a piece. It was the position, and it was why his king could not breathe and his rooks could not move. My rook goes to d5 and changes nothing. His rook owns the g-file. His queen finally has heir. His knight walks to c5. Never sell the piece doing all the work. So rook to g1. Now count his pieces with me. Bishop a8, knight b8, rook c8, rook e8, knight b7, queen c7. 6 of them on the last 2 ranks, and not one is doing anything. It is a full orchestra sitting in the car park. My knight hits d6 and g7. My bishop watches b6. My rook waits on the d-file. Houdini got out of a locked box, but even he was never asked to do it with 6 pieces standing on his coat. Knight to c5, knight takes on d6. It forks both rooks. Pawn to c3, rook to d1, knight to e6, bishop to b3. Everything points at e6. Knight to c6, queen to h5. 2 attackers on the rook. Rook to e7, bishop to b6. My pawn goes there and the bishop follows. Queen to b8, queen to g4. The knight is pinned in place. He needs a square for that rook. Rook to d8 loses it slowly. My queen takes the knight, his rook takes back, my knight checks, his king to g8, and my knight collects the rook. My bishop watched that corner all along. Rook to f8 loses it fast. My bishop simply takes. So he doubles. Rook to e8, my knight takes, his queen takes back, and my bishop takes on e6. I gave a knight on move 37 and spent 17 moves collecting it with interest. My queen looks at g7, my bishop looks back at c8. His knight has nowhere. My other bishop steps to a 7. My rook takes the open file. The position I get back is not the one I paid from. Rook takes, rook to c1, pawn to h5, queen to h3, bishop to b7, rook takes on c3, bishop to h6, rook to d1, bishop to a 6, queen to h4, bishop to g5, queen to e1, knight to d4. My bishop takes. He is losing. And when you are losing, your hand reaches for something to hold. My a4 pawn is loose. His queen can take it. My bishop steps quietly to e3. No check and no capture. His rook to e7, my bishop takes his, he recaptures. My rook to c1, his rook to d7, I trade. His queen takes back, and my queen goes to c3. Plus 9.58, and I never checked him once. From c3, she looks down at his e5 pawn. My rook owns the road to c8. His bishop on a 6 is a bystander. His king shuffles out of the way, and my pawn runs. He won a pawn, and it cost him 7 points. So he takes on d4. My rook takes it back. Bishop to f4, queen to d1, king to g7, pawn to g3, bishop to e5, rook to d8, queen to f7, rook to c5, rook to e7, queen to d5, pawn to h4. Queen takes on f7. He takes back. The queens come off, and I am still winning. King to g2, bishop to b7. Pawn takes. Bishop to c7, rook to e8. Rook to d7. Rook to e6. King to f7. Rook to b6. Rook checks. King to g1. He takes the rook. My pawn takes back, and it is passed. King to g6, check. King to h6, rook to c7, bishop to a 6, rook to a 7, bishop to e2, king to f2, rook to b2, pawn to a 5. 2 passed pawns now. Bishop checks, king to e3, rook checks, king to d4, bishop takes, rook to f7, bishop takes, rook takes with check, king to g7, rook to f2, bishop to e8, rook to c2, king to f6, rook to c7, bishop to a4, pawn to b7. Nothing stops it now. Rook checks, king to c5, rook to b1, pawn to a 6, king to g5, pawn to a 7, rook checks, king to c4, rook to e5, and the pawn queens. Rook takes with check, king to d3, rook to e6, rook checks, rook blocks, queen checks, king to f6, rook takes with check, king to f7, rook checks, king to f6, king to d4, king to e6, and queen to e5 is mate. The Titanic took less time to go down. That is the game. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Rama Chess, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments whether you would have given that knight on move 37. Be honest with yourself. Search Rama Chess on Chrome or Google, or download the app from the Play Store, and I will see you in the next one.